I'm a park ranger in Ohio. What I discovered in the woods is spine-chilling and sinister. Jenna had always felt a deep connection with the woods, a faded path stretching beneath thick canopies, where sunlight danced through the leaves, creating a diffused emerald glow that was almost magical. But today that magic felt wrong. The air hung still and heavy, as if nature itself was bracing for something unspeakable. When she stumbled upon a campsite, hidden deep amongst the trees, a chill crawled up her spine. It was abandoned. A half-collapsed tent flapped listlessly in the breeze, while scattered, tattered toys littered the ground like forgotten relics. What kid would leave behind a rusted tricycle? The ghostly remnants of laughter echoed in her mind, tainted by the stillness enveloping her. Shadows danced just beyond her vision, creating an unsettling sensation of being watched. As she picked up a worn teddy bear, Jenna felt a shiver crawl down her spine. The creature's button eyes seemed almost alive, mocking her in its silence. She dropped it, heart racing, and took a step back. The woods whispered secrets over the crumbling leaves. A sense of dread seeped into her bones. Jenna's hands trembled slightly as she turned to leave, her instincts screaming at her to get out, to retreat to the safety of her cabin, away from the encroaching darkness. But curiosity clawed at her. What had happened here? Just as she fled the confines of the eerie clearing, her phone vibrated violently in her pocket, the jarring sound slicing through the oppressive silence. Unknown number. She hesitated but answered. Static filled her ear, cold and unnatural. Fragments of whispers twisted around her consciousness, echoes of fear. "Help us, find us," the voice pleaded, sending cascades of panic flooding through her. Was someone trapped? Her heart pounded in her chest. Was this a cruel prank? But she knew better. The tales of missing families in Maplewood were whispered during campfire stories and shared like urban legends. Each one vanished without a trace, names growing fainter with the years, and now she felt deep in her gut that these shadows rose from those very tales. Jenna's hands felt cold as ice. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. She returned to her cabin that night, the cozy warmth inside contrasting sharply with the night outside. But something felt off. The comforting sounds of the forest turned ominous, branches tapping at the windows like skeletal fingers. Every creak of timber made her jump. She was not alone. Memories of the campsite haunted her thoughts. Every unsolved mystery crushed against her chest like a weight she could not bear. She heard that same static again, slicing through the thick silence. Another call. This time it was louder, more insistent, a warning. What was it? Her breath quickened. Shadows loomed just outside her window, teasing her perception with movement. Was it the past returning to claim its victims, or had she become a target? Each time she pieced together another unsettling fact about the disappearances, their connections. The smiles hiding their nightmares, she felt the creeping fog of despair inching closer. She was getting too close, and now the unseen forces were watching her, too. In a community that dismissed the darkness lingering at the edges of their lives, she could feel isolation embedding itself deeply within. The woods seemed alive with scrutiny, their atmosphere thickening with hostility, ushering her further toward a truth she couldn't escape. As dawn approached, a sense of dread consumed her. The forest stirred with unnatural life, the whispers gaining clarity. And just before her resolve faltered completely, the sharp ring of her phone shattered the strained quiet. The voice returned, clearer this time, chilling her soul to the marrow. "You're one of us now." Morning sunlight spilled through the cabin's thin curtains, casting eerie shadows along the walls. Jenna rubbed her eyes, as if that could erase the fear still gripping her from last night. She had barely slept, grappling with the new reality that now lay heavy in her mind. The phrase "you're one of us now" looped relentlessly, taunting her reason. What did they mean? She had to find out. Outside, the woods seemed to breathe around her cabin. The leaves rustled restlessly, and the air was thick and oppressive. Jenna drew a deep breath, conscious of the dread curling in her stomach. She could ignore the forest's beckoning call no longer. She needed answers. Those whispers had ignited a fire in her gut, and she set out toward the campsite, every step a battle against that growing apprehension. Stepping back into the clearing, she was overwhelmed again by the remnants of lost innocence. The tent sagged even further, a sad silhouette against the vibrant greens. Jenna's heart raced, each thump matching the rhythm of the whispers echoing in her mind. She approached the tricycle, its faded red paint peeling under layers of dust. Why was it here? Who had played with it? As she knelt down to inspect it, she noticed something in the dirt. A small, crumpled piece of paper emerged from the ground. Her hands were clammy as she reached for it, revealing a drawing done in childish strokes of family, smiling under a strange, looming shadow. The figure's eyes were hollow. A cold sensation washed over her. The wind picked up, a sudden gust that made the trees groan. Jenna quickly stuffed the drawing into her pocket, her instincts flaring. It was time to go. She spun around, the shadows on the ground seeming to stretch toward her. But when she turned, she found them figures standing at the edge of the woods. There were 3 of them, cloaked in ragged, dirty clothes, their faces obscured by tangled hair and the thick, oppressive shadows of the trees. They simply stared, mouths barely moving, as if speaking without sound, the whispers from last night now materializing into their presence. Jenna's heart thundered in her chest. The shadows had come to life. Panic surged. "What do you want?" she yelled, gripping the strap of her backpack like a lifeline. One of them stepped forward, revealing a young girl with sunken cheeks and glassy eyes. "Help us," she whispered, her voice a haunting echo that sent chills through Jenna. "You have to find us, save you? From what?" Jenna could hear the tremor in her voice now. From the darkness, the girl pointed deeper into the woods, her finger trembling. "You're part of it now, don't let it take you too." Jenna stumbled backward, her mind racing. The camping stories of the past had come alive, now grabbing hold of her reality. The connection, the pull to these children, it was stronger than any fear she felt. "No, I'm not like you." But the girl's face distorted into a horrid grin, her shadow stretching, looming over the campsite. "You can't escape what you are." Jenna turned to run, the trees feeling like they were closing in, the air thick with the smell of damp soil and decay. She darted through the underbrush, branches clawing at her skin as she fled. Fear twisted tighter around her as she raced back to her cabin, her thoughts spiraling into chaos. The woods were alive with secrets, and they would not let her go easily. Suddenly, an ear-piercing scream echoed behind her, freezing her in place. It was human, visceral panic surged through her, pushing her to turn back toward the clearing. And that when she noticed it, a shadow larger than the others, following her. What sinister force haunted her footsteps, and what would it take to break free from its grip? Jenna's heart raced as she stood frozen, paralyzed by terror. The shadow loomed closer, swallowing the sunlight. She turned, still gripped by panic, and sprinted towards the cabin, the screams of the girl ringing in her ears. Each footfall sounded muffled against the thick carpet of leaves, the forest closing in around her. Branches whipped at her arms and legs, as if clawing at her to pull her back. She stumbled, narrowly avoiding a knotty root that could send her sprawling. She couldn't think, just run. The trees were a maze, a twisted labyrinth designed to keep her from escaping. Her hands trembled as she fumbled with the cabin door, the latch cold and unforgiving. In a frenzy, she shoved it open and stumbled inside, slamming the door shut behind her. Breathless, she bolted the door, the sound like a gunshot in the unnatural silence. The walls of the cabin felt too close, trapping her in a cage of dread. She slid down to the floor, pressing her back against the door. The air was heavy, stale, and filled with the faint, lingering scent of decay. Jenna's mind raced. Who were those children? What darkness had they faced? And why was the girl's chilling plea echoing in her skull like a relentless drumbeat? Suddenly, A soft tapping interrupted her thoughts. She jumped, eyes darting toward the window. The sound came again, a rhythmic thud that set her nerves on edge. Jenna forced herself to look. What met her eyes sent icy tendrils of fear creeping down her spine. Outside, the three figures stood at the edge of the woods, their faces still obscured but now illuminated by an unnatural glow, like moonlight spilling from a fractured sky. They turned their heads in unison, their hollow eyes fixed directly on her, piercing through the wooden walls that separated them. "Help us." The girlish voice floated in, barely more than a whisper, yet it echoed with impossible depth, sending shivers through her. Jenna shook her head, pressing her palms against her ears as if to block out the sound. "No, leave me alone," she screamed, the words spilling out in desperation. But instead of retreating, they stepped closer, fading into the darkening woods. A dark memory tugged at her. Her father had told tales of things that lurked in the woods, beings that craved company but thrived on despair. "They want you to join them," he had warned. "Their shadows will pull you away." Her body trembled. What if they were the ones dragging her into that endless dark? She grasped for her phone on the floor, fingers shaking so hard she almost dropped it. She swiped the screen, praying for a signal. No bars. Nothing but a frozen circle spinning endlessly. Frustration bubbled alongside the fear. "You have to get out," she whispered to herself, remembering the woods offered secrets, but they also revealed horrors. Jenna forced herself to focus, shoving down the panic rising within her. She spotted her backpack in the corner, still lying open. The drawing crumpled inside must hold something, some clue to what all this meant. With shaking hands, she retrieved it and smoothed it out on the cabin floor. The family in the picture looked too happy, too normal, under that eerie shadow looming behind them. "Who are you?" she murmured, tracing the outline of the shadow with her finger at that moment. The tapping returned, louder, more insistent. She dropped the drawing and leaped to the window. The figures were now gone, swallowed by the trees, but in their place stood a figure cloaked in darkness, the outline shifting, pulsating like a living nightmare. Jenna stumbled back in horror, eyes wide. The figure raised a hand and pointed directly at her, lips parting in a silent scream that resonated deeply within the fabric of her mind. Each heartbeat thudded against her ribs as a realization crashed over her like icy water. She was no longer alone. And whatever it was that haunted the woods had come to claim her. What did it want? And could she survive the pull of that darkness? Light flickered throughout the cabin, casting erratic shadows that danced across the walls, twisting into grotesque figures. Jenna pressed her back against the door, beads of sweat forming at her temples as her breath quickened to a frantic pace. The figure outside remained still, an impenetrable silhouette etched against the dim forest backdrop. "Please," she begged, forcing the words out in a rasp. "Just go away." But the figure didn't waver, its presence suffocating. Each heartbeat felt like thunder, drowning out the gentle rustling of the trees outside. Then, with a sudden, swift motion, the figure turned its head sharply, a spasm of movement that sent a jolt of ice through Jenna's veins. It caught her gaze, and in that moment, she felt its immeasurable weight. The very essence of despair draped over her like a funeral shroud. Every tiny hair on her body stood on end. From outside, a chorus of whispers began, each voice rising above the others in a sinister melody. "Join us? Join us," they chanted, overlapping and blending until it became an irresistible echo that squeezed her chest tight. She gritted her teeth against the tremor boiling in her core, her own limbs threatening to betray her. Fighting to restore some semblance of control, Jenna frantically searched the cabin. A small table caught her eye, a lamp flickering with a weak light that seemed almost mocking in comparison to the engulfing darkness. She scrambled forward, gripping the edge as if it were her lifeline. What should she do? Where could she go? The phone lay discarded, useless at her feet. She scooped it up, her fingers slipping with sweat as she stared at the blank screen, praying for any shred of hope. Service, a message, a signal. But darkness wrapped around her like a serpent, choking the life out of the faint chance of escape. The rhythmic tapping returned, now reverberating around the cabin. It was no longer just a signal from the outside, but a pulse, a beckoning heartbeat colliding with her own. She knew she had to act. Impactful words from her father flashed through her mind. You must confront the shadows to survive. Her resolve solidified. Jenna clenched her jaw, approached the window, and drew a deep breath. She forced herself to look again, to face whatever entity lay beyond. The figure was closer now, its outline sharp like jagged glass. And there, with the soft glow illuminating its features, she could finally see its face, or rather, a mask of horror stretched across its visage. Pale skin, deep-set eyes, and a mouth twisted into a silent scream. They were not there to help her. They were waiting, feeding off her fear. And with her heart pounding like a war drum, she stepped back, seeking refuge behind the worn couch. Jenna's thoughts darted like a moth in a dark room. She could faintly hear a dragging sound, footsteps, shuffling against the wood floor, as if something from the outside had finally breached the sanctuary. What do you want? She cried, her voice trembling. Silence answered, hanging heavy like a lead weight. Out of nowhere, a crash broke the stillness. Something had smashed against the door. The lock rattled violently, echoing through the cabin like a desperate plea for escape. Jenna's instincts kicked in. Adrenaline surged through her veins, and she spun around to face the back of the room. The only way out was through the kitchen window. Dashing towards the kitchen, she felt dread crawl up her spine. She could feel the oppressive heat of impending doom closing in, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying wood. She threw herself against the window, throwing it open. It groaned in protest, and as she struggled to climb through, every fiber of her being screamed for her to stop. Just then, a cold hand wrapped around her ankle and yanked her back. She let out a strangled scream, twisting to fight against the grip as darkness pooled around her. In that moment, she realized whatever had called for her was not merely an echo from the past. It was alive, ravenous, and it wasn't letting go as she screamed. No, the eyes of the figures outside lit up with a sinister glow, and she understood this was only the beginning. What awaited her just beyond the safety of the window, and would she be strong enough to break free from their grasp? The grip tightened around Jenna's ankle, dragging her back with relentless force. Panic clawed at her throat as she kicked and flailed. The cabin, her only sanctuary, was becoming a trap. She could see the figures outside shifting in anticipation, their faces masked in shadows, but their intentions all too clear. No, she shrieked, her voice scratching at her throat like sandpaper. She glanced back, her panic igniting more raw energy. The cold hand pulsed, icy fingers pressing against her skin, and Jenna twisted as she fought to free herself. She was no longer just a victim. She was a warrior, and there was only one escape. Gathering what courage she had left, she bent her knee and struck out. Her foot connected with something solid, a knee, a thigh she couldn't tell. At that moment, the grip loosened just enough for her to shove her other foot down against the wooden floor and push herself toward the window. A surge of adrenaline coursed through her, powering her like an engine. With one final heave, she tumbled from the window, landing hard in a bed of damp leaves. The air outside was alive with sounds, whispers clawing through the trees, rustles that hinted at shadows lurking just beyond her vision. She fought back a wave of nausea and scrambled to her feet, lungs flaming as fear propelled her forward into the dense darkness of the woods. Branches snagged at her clothes, tearing at her skin like angry hands. But she pressed on, desperation mixing with the pine-scented air. A frantic thought struck her. The park was vast. Could it swallow her whole? Would the trees protect her from the hollow appetites waiting just out of sight? Or would they simply join in, ready to feast? The whispers followed, now less of a chorus and more an echoing cacophony. Her name, her fears, her memories rolling back to her like an old film reel. Jenna, they breathed. Come back. She didn't dare to look back. The moonlight peeked through the branches, illuminating small patches of ground, but darkness swallowed most of the forest whole. She conceived every shadow as a potential threat, and her heart raced faster than her steps. Then, in the distance, a shout pierced the night's shroud. A voice, familiar yet mangled, calling for her. Jenna! Where are you? It belonged to David, her fiancé, his deep timbre filled with panic. David! She yelled as loudly as she could, the words slipping between her gasps. But the whispers didn't fade. They grew, multiplying into a tempest that surged through the trees until it felt like the woods themselves were closing in. Jenna couldn't stop, even as doubt scratched at the edges of her mind. Her legs ached, but she powered on, driven by the raw need to see David again. As she maneuvered around trees and bramble, memories flooded her, laughing, sharing secrets, the warmth of his embrace. Would they be lost forever? Out of nowhere, she stumbled upon a clearing illuminated by an otherworldly glow that bathed the grass in silvery light. Felt strange, unnatural. Shadows flickered, weaving together, and deep down she realized she stood at the heart of something larger than herself. Suddenly, the air felt electric, charged. The whispers weren't just haunting her. They were converging, rushing toward her with dangerous enthusiasm. Whatever force possessed this place wanted more than just her fear, craved her. Before she could shout again, a shadowy figure emerged from behind a twisted tree, its features unmistakable. It was David, only his eyes glimmered with that same eerie light. His mouth twisted into a smile that sent a chill right down to her bones. Jenna, come. He beckoned, arms outstretched. Fear erupted within her again. She ran, but not away from him. She ran deeper into the forest, the whispers turning into gales that pushed against her back. They cried, they howled, and she realized whatever this place was, it wouldn't let her escape. It wanted her here, lost to the shadows, lost to time. The ground shook beneath her. Would she find a way out, or was she running toward something worse? And when she turned, that corner, would she see David's smile or something far more sinister waiting just beyond the dark? The approaching twilight didn't promise safety, it promised everything she feared. Jenna sprinted through the thick underbrush, branches clawing at her clothes like the fingers of the damned. The glow from the clearing faded behind her, swallowed by the forest's oppressive blackness. She could feel the whispers swirling. Jenna, they harmonized with the rustle of leaves, turning her name into a haunting melody that made her skin crawl. She stumbled, barely catching herself against the rough bark of a massive oak. Breathing heavily, she leaned against it, trying to collect her thoughts. David's face still lingered in her mind. That twisted smile, those unnatural eyes. She shook her head violently, dispelling the image like a bad dream. Her instinct screamed at her to keep moving. The warmth of his embrace felt false and sickening now. Stay away. She wanted to scream, but her voice cracked under the strain. The deeper she went, the louder the whispers became. It was as if the forest itself wanted to consume her, to drag her into its fold. Another frantic shout cut through the dark, a voice echoing off the trees. Jenna, stay where you are. It was David again, but something about it was wrong. This time, it held an edge of urgency that pricked her nerves. David, she cried back, desperation making her voice tremble. I'm here. The replies twisted in and out, fading into eerie laughter. Come home. Jenna, they beckoned, slithering through the leaves, wrapping around her mind. Panic eclipsed her rational thought. Was he truly searching for her? Or was this a cruel trick? She had to trust her instincts. Turning sharply, she darted left, plunging deeper into the darkness. Suddenly, she felt it, a pull, impossibly cold and heavy against her chest. It was as if the entire forest conspired to draw her back toward that clearing, the epicenter of whatever malevolent force hunted her. A chill swept through her body, and she pressed her hands to her heart, willing it to calm, but it raced on, pounding like a war drum. Lightning quick, shadows flickered between the trees. Taking form, she could almost discern a multitude of eyes glinting in the dim light, their owners darting just out of reach. Some primal part of her screamed to fight, but her legs were heavy, weighing her down with panic. Thorns snagged her jacket, and she felt stitches beginning to tear. No, she gasped, yanking herself free. The thought of being caught in this accursed land made bile rise in her throat. She stumbled forward again, swallowing hard against the rising panic. Then she saw it, a faint flicker of light straight ahead. Rushing toward it, she pressed on, desperate for hope. Each step felt like a betrayal of her instincts, yet the looming specter of darkness drove her onward. Jenna! This time the voice took on a different tone, one shrouded in desperation, laced with something that echoed like madness. In the back of her mind, doubt gnawed at her resolve. What if she found someone she didn't recognize? The light grew brighter, taking on a warm, inviting hue. It beckoned her closer. She slowed as she reached the opening, revealing what lay beyond, more of that strange, shimmering glow, but now accompanied by a circle of figures, their faces obscured beneath wide-brimmed hoods. They sat cross-legged, unmoving, chanting softly in unison as if conducting a dark ritual. Jenna froze. They were not lost souls. They were hunters, and they were waiting for her. They seemed to know her, recognize her as the one they sought. Join us, they intoned, comfort laced with a sinister edge. Her gut churned, and she took a step back, turning to flee once more, but it was too late. The shadows around her shifted, closing in, and the sound of whispers grew deafening. What now? Would she confront these figures, or was there a different darkness lurking at her heels? One more terrifying than the monsters she could see? The air thickened, and she could hear them weaving another tale, a story meant for her. A story she might not survive. The chanting grew louder, saturating the air with a rhythmic pulse. Horror washed over Jenna. They were expecting her, and every heartbeat echoed the fear in her mind. She whirled around, desperate to cut through the looming shadows, but the trees only closed tighter, wrapping her in their gnarled fingers. Her breath quickened, and the fog of dread clouded her vision. Join us, they called again, their voices lacing into a chilling harmony that rattled her bones. You are one of us. The figures shifted slightly, their hoods casting deep shadows where eyes might have been. Just the thought sent fresh terror coursing through her veins. She could feel something in the space between them, an unseen force, like a noose tightening around her throat. Was it their intent to trap her, to ensnare her very soul? Jenna forced herself to take a step back, but the weight of the forest pressed against her, leaving her paralyzed. In her heart, she knew she didn't belong to them. She wasn't one of the lost, and she was certainly not prepared to join their twisted night. Suddenly, a voice pierced the chaos. Jenna, don't listen to them. It was David. His voice cut through the chanting like a knife, raw and desperate. She whipped her head in the direction of the sound, her heart lifting for a flicker of hope. David, she shouted into the stifling darkness. Where are you? Over here. I can get you out. But the urgency in his tone thickened with panic, making it difficult to discern where he was. The figures began to stir, their chanting intensifying, threatening to drown her out. Jenna didn't have time to think. She turned and bolted toward the sound, weaving through the gnarled roots and dead leaves. The world blurred around her, everything but the voice fading into the suffocating blackness. Just as hope kindled in her chest, she skidded to a halt at a clearing, the oppressive shadows pulling back. The moonlight broke through the trees, illuminating a wide circle of tall, drooping grass. Then she saw him, a dark figure swathed in shadow at the edge. Jenna, this way. David beckoned, dread plastered across his features. But as she moved closer, Jenna saw something lurking in David's eyes. It wasn't the warmth she had known, but something colder, darker. Fear bubbled in her chest. Get away from me, she shouted, instinctively stepping back. The shadows roiled behind him, flickering as if alive, twisting and reaching. Jenna, you need to trust me. I'm here to help you. But his voice strained, laced with an unfamiliar edge that sent a chill racing down her spine. Help? Or to trap me? She challenged, feeling the uncertainty crackle in the air between them. The eerie chant rippled through the grass, pulling at her mind, trying to seduce her back to the gathering. Please, he cried, stepping toward her. You must believe me. But for every step he took, the cloaked figures surged forward, forming a line behind him. The air hummed with dark energy, and Jenna felt the pull growing stronger. No, she gasped, panic surging like acid in her throat. She spun around, ready to return to the safety of the trees. But darkness encroached from all sides, and the flickering shadows morphed into what could only be nightmares, faceless, wanton things that hungered for her. Drawing in a shaky breath, Jenna stood at the edge of the clearing, the flicker of moonlight her sole source of strength. "I want to go back," she whispered resolutely, clenching her fists. The figures paused, their chant faltering as if her defiance disrupted their spell. "Jenna, don't!" David's voice cracked, desperation spilling into irritation. "Or what?" she snapped, her heart racing. "What are you going to do?" The ground beneath her trembled, and suddenly it all felt too real. The darkness was hungry, and it was closing in around her like a vice. Would she have to make a decision? David or the dark? Fight or flight? She stood wavering on the brink, feeling the pulse of the night around her. Something was coming, something she had to face, and in that heartbeat of clarity, she had a choice to make. What would it cost her? Jenna felt the land shifting, pulling her in every direction. She took a deep breath, ready to confront whatever horror lay ahead. But the shadows answered her with a deafening silence, and that left one terrifying question. What awaited her just out of sight? Panic coursed through Jenna as the silence stretched. The deep, unsettling quiet was more oppressive than the chanting, pressing down on her like a physical weight. She could feel the stares of the figures, cold, unyielding, filled with a hunger that made her skin crawl. "What do you want from me?" she shouted, her voice trembling as it echoed back from the shadows. The only answer came from David, his face flickering in and out of the moonlight, desperate and pleading. "You need to choose, Jenna." His words were a desperate gasp, each syllable seemingly pulled from the depths of his being. Yet his eyes held something unsettling, an unsettling darkness that gnawed at her resolve. "I don't want any part of this." Jenna shook her head violently, stepping back further into the dark embrace of the trees. But they loomed taller now, their twisted branches resembling skeletal hands grasping at her. "Let me go." With a sudden rush, the cloaked figures surged forward, moving as one, a dark tide rolling against the shore of her defiance. The chant rose again, a terrible symphony swirling in the air, thrumming like her racing heart. The shadows danced and twisted, creating grotesque patterns that flickered like memories just out of reach. "Jenna, listen to me." David's form was cut off by the shifting darkness. The harder he fought to reach her, the more the entities around him pulled him like a puppet on invisible strings. "They will take you. Please." The figures began to close in, an encroaching mass of malevolence. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but the roots of the forest seemed to weave tighter around her feet, anchoring her in place. A chilling thought snaked through her mind. What if David had come here, too? What if he had crossed into their world? She took a deep breath, gathering every ounce of courage. "I want to let you take me." The shadows withdrew for just a heartbeat, as if her defiance had unexpected power. But then they recoiled and surged again, anger churning in the air like a tempest. "You think you can fight against your fate?" they chorused, their voices layered with malicious laughter that echoed off the trees. "No," she screamed, feeling fury replace her fear. "I will fight you." With a surge of adrenaline, Jenna lunged toward David, her heart pounding. But as she reached for him, she saw at the unmistakable flicker of something dark crawling across his skin, a shadow deep within him that writhed and pulsed. "Jenna, don't!" His voice echoed hopelessly as the shadow that flickered behind him turned into a mass, coiling around him like a serpent, binding him with an otherworldly force she didn't understand. Her hands stopped midair, an invisible wall separating them. David, the power of whatever held him was suffocating. She felt tears sting her eyes. This couldn't be happening. "Join us." The dark chant forced its way into her mind, drowning her senses, tugging her back toward the figures that waited with anticipation. As their chant swallowed her will, Jenna felt a burst of clarity. "If I have to sacrifice myself, then I'll take you with me." With that final thought, she turned and ran into the heart of the dark forest, away from him, away from the looming figures. Branches tore at her skin, the shadows snapping at her heels, a cacophony of whispers swirling in her ears. She could feel them behind her, almost tasting the cold breath of the darkness as it clawed at her back. But she wouldn't let it take her. The trees thrashed around her, the ground shifting beneath her feet. She had to find a way out, a way to sever the bond between David and whatever sinister force ensnared him. Each frantic step pulled her deeper into the maze. She risked a glance back. The figures were gaining, their faces now forming within the shadows, grotesque and twisted. A shiver cascaded down her spine. Then, amid the chaos, she stumbled upon an old stone altar, covered in moss, hidden beneath a thick canopy of trees. Something about it exuded power. Amid the fear, questions sprouted in her mind. Was this the key to breaking the spell? Heart racing, she stepped closer, but the chanting surged to a deafening roar. "Join us," they cried, clawing at her mind as she approached the altar, determined to fight back. Something was about to happen, something that could either save her or doom them both. But the shadow surged forward again, hungry and chaotic, and the noise enveloped her like a shroud. With a determined yell, she reached for the altar, an unwilling sacrifice to a malevolent presence that offered no mercy. What would she discover in the dark depths of that forgotten stone? What price would she pay for freedom? Jenna's fingers brushed against the cold stone of the altar. The moment she connected, a pulse radiated through her, warmer than the chill of the night air. But that warmth brought no comfort. Instead, it felt as if the earth beneath her was awakening, breathing, shifting. "Join us," the chant crescendoed, vibrating in her bones and making her feel sick. The figures behind her surged forward, twisting in their darkly flowing cloaks, and the faces, oh God, the faces, grinned like demons caught in eternal hunger. Desperation surged, clawing at her throat. "Please, let him go," she screamed, her voice raw and pleading. But the only answer was a mocking echo, a reflection of her own despair. Against the altar, Jenna pressed her palms down. The stone was slick with moss, and when she closed her eyes, she felt the pulse turn into a steady thrum, synchronized with her heartbeat. It was almost like a heartbeat, a dark, ancient rhythm that seemed to call to her. "Remember who you are," a voice whispered, softer than the chorus of shadows. It was David's voice, though distant, weaving in and out of sight. "You can fight back, you always could." The breath caught in her throat. "Fight back?" she murmured, glancing at the altar again. A line between her reality and something far more sinister blurred. The chanting figures pressed closer, now just shadows in an inky sea. In a frantic move, she placed her hands back on the stone, summoning strength from within. "I won't let you take me," she echoed, but this time it felt different. A surge of power sparked beneath her fingertips. With each passing second, Jenna felt herself unraveling the darkness that coiled around her. The unnatural thrum became a clash of wills, of violent, cosmic struggle, and it anchored her. She envisioned David, and she felt her heart ignite at the thought of saving him. Suddenly, the shadows shrieked in anger, their voices harmonizing into a chaotic roar. "You cannot resist your fate. You are one of us," the chant echoed, pulling at her sanity. In that moment, Jenna's body became a conduit, the altar reacting explosively. She gasped as light swirled from her palms, spiraling into fierce shapes, illuminating the darkness. She could feel the binding darkness around David pulse in pain, and the shadows recoiled hesitantly. "Jenna," David's voice, now desperate with fight again. "Don't do this alone. Fight with me." She took a shaky breath, drawing on David's strength, channeling it with her own blurred memories of laughter, joy, the warmth of sunshine. The collective power inside her erupted into a blinding flash, resonating against the oppressive darkness. The figures staggered back, and for a single breath, they fell silent. The forest stirred, as if caught in the throes of a storm breaking. But just as quickly, a shadow tore through the light, swinging back toward her, a wave of cold aiming to swallow every trace of hope. "Join us," it hissed, each syllable carrying the weight of despair. Jenna staggered at the sound, her strength waning. "No," she cried, her next thought filled with clarity. "I am not yours." The air crackled with defiance. Everyone around her stumbled, their shadows jerking, fighting against the power she had begun to wield. Jenna pressed against the altar, clasping the edges tightly, her heart hammering like the beat of war drums. Yet the darkness wrapped itself tighter around her, pulling, clutching. The sensation went beyond fight or flight. It was a comprehensive effort to drag her into the abyss. Was she strong enough to face this alone? David's silhouette flickered out of reach, and the ground began to tremble beneath her. Then, just as hope began to dim, her vision narrowed on the altar. Something within seemed alive, the very stone calling to her in whispers. If she could just tap into it, maybe, just maybe, she would find an answer, a way to break free. "Give me strength," she whispered, closing her eyes again. But the shadows surged, a final desperate attempt to claim her. A thunderous roar drowned her prayers, wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket. All at once, Jenna felt herself lifting out of time, out of place, her body afloat in the chaos. What fate awaited her as she was consumed by shadows? What was the true cost of defiance against the ancient evil lurking in those woods? Jenna gasped as the world spun around her. The shadows clawed at her, trying to drag her back down into their depths. She fought fiercely against the darkness, her heart pounding like a hammer. "I am not yours," she screamed again, channeling every ounce of strength from the deepest part of her. The world began to vibrate, and the altar trembled beneath her hands. Suddenly, a surge of power erupted from within, pushing back against the shadows. The confrontation was raw and immediate. Jenna could feel the malevolent force recoiling in shock, unsure how to deal with her defiance. With her eyes closed, a vision bloomed in her mind, a recollection of laughter, sunlight, warmth. It was David's voice, calling to her from the depths of her memory, urging her to fight. "Remember us," he pleaded, as the strength of their bond sparked new life in her. In that moment, she opened her eyes, and everything shifted. A blinding light shot from her palms, pushing against the darkness, wrapping around her like threads of hope. With each pulse, the spectral chant of "Join us" faltered. The shadows, once so menacing, began to dissipate like mist under the sun, twisting and curling away into invisibility. "Jenna, break free." David's voice echoed through her mind, clearer than ever. That warmth filled her, igniting a fire that screamed against the coldness wrapping around her soul. The light grew stronger. Jenna thrust out her hands, and the altar responded, glowing with an otherworldly brilliance. Her voice rose as if it carried the very weight of the woods. "I choose life. I choose love." As those words left her lips, a cascade of light flooded the clearing, illuminating the figures that had once shadowed her existence. The chanting erupted in chaos as they staggered back, their dark forms flickering with uncertainty. Jenna could feel the collective despair of the lost beings rise, but she stood firm. "You will not take me. You will not take anyone again." With that, she channeled every joyful memory, every moment of love, and sent it out like a shockwave. The shadows shrieked and writhed, their forms destabilizing under the weight of her conviction. The forest echoed with their howls, but Jenna felt a rush of liberation. The bond between her and the darkness, now severed, felt marvelous as she reclaimed her agency. "Jenna, I'm right here." David's voice pierced through the chaos, pulling her closer to reality. She turned, hearing him call her name, and there he stood at the edge of light, barely restrained within the folds of shadow. With renewed strength pulling her, Jenna surged forward, the fear of losing him propelling every step. The darkness shrieked, angry at her defiance, but she wasn't backing down. "I'm coming," she cried, stretching out her hand as she reached him. Together, as their fingers grazed, a jolt of energy pulsed through them. Suddenly, the shadows recoiled, shattering against the light as if they couldn't withstand the unity of their bond. The ancient evil they sought to control faltered once and for all. "Let us end this," Jenna yelled, a battle cry that surged through the forest. The light intensified, enveloping them both. With a fierce wave, Jenna pulled David close, grounding each other in a sanctuary of warmth against the cold grip of shadows. At that moment, the altar erupted with divine energy, lifting them both into the air. Silvery threads of light burst forth, spreading like wildfire, wrapping the remaining darkness like a cocoon. Jenna squinted against the resplendence that filled the woods, cascading waves of purity sweeping through the forest like a cleansing rain. And within that burst of light, she felt their prison dissolving, the children freed from their long imprisonment. Spirits took flight, swirling around them, remnants of those lost to the shadows, now released. As darkness evaporated away under the glow of freedom, Jenna felt lightness, a beautiful, freeing sensation pervading her body. The whispers surrendered, replaced by the joyful echoes of laughter and warmth, carried by the tender breeze. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she and David descended slowly, enveloped by the protective embrace of the woods. The oppressive weight melted away. Together, they stepped back onto familiar earth, breathing in the air scented with possibility. "We did it," David whispered breathlessly, his arm entwining with hers. "Yes," Jenna smiled through her tears, the relief and joy bubbling within her. "We did it together." With every shadow retreating into obscurity, they made their way back toward the path that led home, a path where the past would finally rest in peace. Now the woods felt different. They no longer seemed like a prison but more like guardians of the life they had fought to reclaim. As they emerged from the trees, the sun began to rise, a magnificent dawn breaking over the horizon, golden rays piercing the remnants of night. Seeping hope filled the air, and together they faced the future, hand in hand, free from the shackles of the past. This was their moment, and it couldn't have felt more alive. Don't let this moment slip away. You need to subscribe now and join this adventure for more exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and show your support. I want to hear from you. Flood the comments section with your thoughts about this epic ending and share your theories. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Let's keep this community growing together.